Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of RPG Radio on the brand new patch for Diablo for June 27th, 23, with some big updates to the Nightmare Dungeons, Nightmare XP, and a whole bunch of other stuff that we're going to talk about. So if you didn't read those patch notes and you want someone to talk it in your ear, you have come to the right place. The gameplay in the background is going to be my newly buffed Deathblow Barbarian in a couple Nightmare Dungeons, absolutely kicking and smashing and leaping all over the place because they got a very, very substantial amount of damage in all the places that I needed it, well, most of the places that we needed it to be. So, hang on to your butts, let's talk about some stuff. As it is in comparison to Nightmare Dungeons, you are going to be able to click on the sigil in your inventory. You're going to be able to pull up your map, click directly on the Nightmare Dungeon icon, and your character will teleport right outside the front. It is that easy now, and things are going to be much more accessible. Not as much horse riding to get from point A to point B if your Nightmare Dungeon didn't have a waypoint out front. So, good news there, gonna make things a little bit more efficient to get around, but that's the big one. That's what everybody's happy about. It's nice and easy. There you go. The next big one on everybody's list, apart from the ease of teleportation, it's still coming in with the Nightmare Dungeons. The XP awarded for completing Nightmare Dungeons is going to be significantly increased as well. And I can tell you, after finishing all three of these, I can definitely see the difference. It was, before this patch, it was taking me probably 4 to 5 Nightmare Dungeons to get the Paragon node while we're trying to level in this part of the game, and I can safely say after 3 of them, with a little bit of Tree of Whispers in between there, I got 2 nodes for the price of 3 dungeons rather than 1 node for the price of 4 to 5 dungeons. I don't specifically know the numbers looking at the patch notes, but I can tell you, as it feels really, 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 really ridiculously good. So, take that as you will. If you're not in this part of the game yet, things are going to be much better for you when the time arrives, and if you have your character up in tier 4 or even tier 3 and you're doing these Nightmare Dungeons, it is going to be a lot smoother because this XP boost is huge. The other component of this boost in XP is that the monsters in the Nightmare Dungeons are also going to be giving you bigger XP. So, that means that once you finish the dungeon, you're going to get a big chunk of XP just for finishing it, but while it is going on, while you're completing the dungeon, killing the monsters, doing the objectives inside the dungeon, you are going to have a lot more XP coming out of all of those elite packs, out of the big density of monsters in all of the dungeons. So everything is turning up good stuff for the player when it comes to doing Nightmare Dungeons, and that is going to be the same for Helltide events and doing individual whispers for the Tree of Whispers bounties. So that means that when you are taking on whispers for the tree, whether that is your dungeons, your farming quests, your culling quests, your basements, or your cellars, all of that stuff is going to come with more XP attached to it, though the ultimate turn into the tree doesn't reward you anything more than it always does, which is a box. So that part is a little bit disappointing, but at the same time, being able to get more XP out of doing individual things is certainly better. And if you can get a Nightmare Dungeon Tree of Whispers combo, you can obviously get pretty good sets of stuff going on. You get lots of, rewards for finishing stuff when they all coalesce into one shiny golden star of goodness, right? I also mentioned Helltides, and that means that you are going to be getting XP when you open up the chests in the Helltide events. So using your cinders to go open up chests during the Helltide will grant you significantly more bonus XP when you complete that type of objective. Again, I don't love the Hell Tides. I think they're probably my least favorite thing to do, but at least this is a step in the right direction while we're trying to farm 175 cinders to get mystery chests, because those are really the only ones that feel worth it. So, all that being said, those chests should provide a lot more that we're looking for, and the Hell Tides themselves have enemies that are higher level, so things should be even better for grinding out XP for Paragon points, keeping that progression curve trending much further upward than we're used to. So fingers crossed, Hell Tides hopefully are less monotonous now, but I guess we'll see. I mean, maybe they turn out to be the greatest new thing, and I doubt it. Compared to the Nightmare Dungeon changes and all the XP that you're getting from that, along with teleporting to it, there is no way you're going to be able to unseat Nightmare Dungeons as the most fun thing to do in the endgame apart from world bosses. So, that being said, let's talk more about the Barbarian changes specifically. There were a big number of buffs for the Barbarian. Huge muscles got huger, and leg day reigns supreme after all. The first change that came about for the Barbarian is to a couple of their basic skills. 3 of them, actually, no, all 4 of them. All 4 of them got buffed in one way or the other, but my favorite, and the one that this build is focused on, is called Lunging Strike. It got very small buffs, but they are still very good buffs for what we want them to do, meaning that the damage buff, even though it's only 3% going from 30 to 33, that incremental change is going to be still big enough to matter, and more importantly, the fury generated coming from 9 up to 10 means that getting the fury bar is going to be incrementally easier, and it's just going to make launching these upheavals that much quicker. Now, I know it doesn't sound like much, but when you are lunging striking at least 3 to 4 times within any given combo use, that is 30 fury generated instead of, what is that, 27? And that can stack up pretty nicely because even the small numbers count. Every little bit counts. You want to have exactly the right amount of fury to launch your upheavals, or you'll be like me, slapping that right click, hoping that something's going to work when you are just 1 or 2 fury away. Bash also got a change of its fury generation going from 10 to 11, so if you are looking at Bash as a as the main basic ability for your Barbarian, that increase is going to be even better than Lunging Strike, and couple that with the Fury Generation passive that you have on the next tree, I think it's the core tree, you can gain even more fury with your Bash swings. Bash in and of itself is an ability I want to start a build around because it does offer a lot of utility, but I think it gets overshadowed because of things like Lunging Strike, Frenzy, and then to some extent Flay if you're working on a building or a bleeding build like I am right now. Flay kind of forces you to use that one, which is unfortunate, but at the same time it makes sense, you know, line it up, knock it down. Bash though, apart from the fury generation buff, it is also going to increase enhanced Bash's fortify amount from 10% to 20%, so it's literally doubling the amount that you can get of that of the fortify generation once you put a single point into that modifier for Bash. Very early on, very good stuff can happen there once you start stacking the fortify, especially if you're looking at a significantly two-handed overpower build. This one is, but we do want to do a lot of changing of the weapons between there, and the mobility from Lunging Strike is just incomparable for what I need on this Barbarian. So, Bash is still really, really good, but for my build, still not good enough to change. Of the 4, Frenzy got a buff, but it was the most minute of them. It went up from 20% damage to 22% base damage. Still good. I mean, when you're using Frenzy, it's going to be the focus of a lot of your damage. You're going to want to use it very often because it's like a minigun. You want it to ramp up. You got to get those stacks going. You got to make stuff happen with Frenzy first before you can use other abilities in your build. So the Frenzy damage bonus is still good. It's just comparatively the weakest buff of the 4 basic abilities, which leaves us talking about Flay. Flay got a bleeding base damage increase from 36 to 40%. It got a Fury generation increase like the last two, from 9 to 10. It only went up 1, but still better than what we were working with. And then your enhanced Flay is the one that has a % chance to make enemies vulnerable. That's gone from 10 to 15%. So that should be activating at least a little bit more significantly or more often than it was before. So I'm pretty excited about that change in particular because I do have a bleeding build in the wings, and I would like to see the vulnerability stack up a bit more often, because the way that vulnerability and rend work together is they're very complementary. So you want to be using rend on vulnerable targets to reset the vulnerability duration or extend the vulnerability duration. We'll talk about that when I get to that build, but for now, it's a good change, I think, and a lot was done to Flay to make it better. So all around good stuff. Now, in terms of core abilities, down the next part of the tree for the Barbarian's abilities, Double Swing got a 4% buff on its damage. But if we're being honest, Double Swing's a little tough for me to make a judgment call on. I've been trying it in other builds, but I can't seem to feel it out. Maybe I'm just missing the gear that it really needs to do to really shine, but I'm not sure. Maybe this damage buff will change things. Maybe it'll start to feel, over the edge like I want it to, but at least for right now, I'm not getting everything that I want out of Double Swing, even though it is a very cool ability and honestly super aesthetically pleasing, because you can just chain lop the heads off bad guys, at least in the earlier difficulties. I'm not real sure about how the endgame and Double Swing treat each other. It did not work in my other build, and it made me really sad because the 2-axe swinging is pretty iconic for the Blood God. Anyway, I mean, there you have it. Now, the big boy for the patch notes for the Barbarian, for this build specifically, Kick. Kick got a huge buff. And when I say that, I mean in every good way possible. Kick got a cooldown reduction from 17 to 13 seconds, so we're already chucking a whole bunch of time out the window for this ability that has 2 charges. Awesome. And the base damage that Kick deals to enemies knocked back into terrain went up from 54 to 70%. The reason that is significant is because of the aspect that lets Kick deal damage to explode people. When your Kick meets its endpoint, when it does that stun, that's when the big damage happens, and that's typically going to kill your smaller mobs, your less impressive kind of Weenie Hut Jr. Bad guys. So when they hit that wall and they carry a couple people along with them, they explode, the chain explodes even further, and suddenly you've got a whole bunch of enemies just poofed out of existence with one kick. It is incredible how much damage it does. And with this build specifically, there are 3 abilities that really carry the damage as far as we need it to. Number 1 being Death Blow, which is, the entire focus of the build. But number 2 is Leap, and number 3 was Kick. But now it's looking more like Kick is doing all the work, and Death Blow and Leap are just kind of cleaning up the scraps. It is gross how good a buff this was to an ability that I already really love. So it's just A+ tier goodness. I absolutely love it. Charge also got a buff. I don't particularly love charge. I'm kind of a leap school barbarian, but it got kind of the same thing that Kick did. When enemies get knocked back into terrain, the damage is going to go up from 15% to 30%. So they doubled it. And what I was talking about with Kick, when you knock enemies into terrain and they explode, that can also happen with charge. So if you are using charge and Kick in your build, they can both pop enemies if you get them into a wall and do enough damage to them. Again, leap is way more fun to me, and it just seems way more useful because of the resets that you get from Kick and ground stomp, but charge also does some better stuff now and has kind of the same utility as Kick does. Also a brawling skill, so if you're using those two of those together and you have some gear that's giving you plus to brawling skill points, you get them at the same time. It's good. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm not gonna tell you charge isn't a good ability, but I don't know, it's just kind of boring by comparison. Also a little clunky by comparison to leap, but it is what it is. Iron Skin is the next ability to get a buff. It's not an ability I use very often because it doesn't count as a shout, and it's just a button that you push for some defensive stuff, some defensive goodness. And what they buffed was the enhanced version. So the first point that you put into Iron Skin after taking the base ability is going to increase the barrier from 10 to 20% of your max life. So really, really very good for survivability. Probably still really strong for like thorn-based builds if you're looking for that type of thing. I mean, strong buff all around. I just don't use the ability enough to really feel that impact. So forgive me, but it is still good. It does still seem wickedly good to go up to 20% of your max life. Given that barbarians typically have pretty big health bars, that's not an insignificant number. Keep your eyes open for this wicked little bug right here, though. First, because we're going to kick this man through the threshold, he's going to disappear, and I have no idea what's happening. The enemy is not on the screen anymore. He just poofed, and now it's just a room full of spiders, which is fine with me. Spiders are much easier to squish than big angry zombie people, but I don't know what happened there. That's not a trick of editing. That's nothing I can understand. That was just a boot through a doorway, and then suddenly I'm in a different timeline. So obviously there's still some bugs hanging around on the Blizzard side of things. But more to the point, Call of the Ancients is the first buff that came around for the Barbarians Ultimate, and that is buffing Prime Call of the Ancients. The bonus attack speed increased from 10 to 20%. So I don't know if that is significant for Call of the Ancients players. I think Call of the Ancients is mostly used in whirlwind builds, so obviously I'm gonna stay pretty far away from that for a while. Also, picking up another set of potions is a great idea when you run out and the monsters decide to be stingy with them in a dungeon. Totally worth going back to town and stocking up, because it's kind of awful not to have them when everybody does such ridiculous amounts of damage. But yeah, so Call of the Ancients getting buffed there. The context of the buff is kind of lost on me, but the buff I am super into is Iron Maelstrom. Now, I don't use this ability on this build, which is a little bit sad, but on my upcoming Bleeding build, Iron Maelstrom will have a pretty significant part to play. The big change here that's going to make this this ability even more ridiculous, in my opinion, than it already is that cooldown going from 60 to 45 seconds. Because The cooldown on this ability is generally about 30 to 45 seconds anyway, because you can reduce the cooldown of Iron Maelstrom pretty significantly with the buffs, or the points that you put into its modifiers. That being said, you can also get cooldown reduction from Ground Stomp, not that I'm using that, but there are lots of ways to reduce the cooldown of Iron Maelstrom as it is, and it is pretty awesome that the devs are just dropping it down significantly already. That is a 25% reduction in the cooldown, just baseline, not anything that you as the player have to worry about. So that being said, that's the first significant part of it. Prime Iron Maelstrom is also getting bonuses to its critical chance and its critical damage. So both of those things you're getting buffed from a 10% chance to a 30% chance, and then from the damage of the crits being buffed from 20% to 40%. Everything happening on that first modifier that you put into this ability is getting extra good. The chance is getting tripled and the damage is getting doubled, and that is gross, especially because this should have a very, very ridiculously short cooldown. It is awesome. And finally, there is a small buff to your mount ability, your mount leap. It's called Bounding Slam, and the damage went from 75% up to 112%. Not that it is, still significantly usable, because it's got a 10-second cooldown as soon as you jump onto the horse, unless you're in town. It kind of... it's neither here nor there, because the ability itself is really fun, it's really great, but that 10-second warm-up that it has is super awkward and makes mount abilities pretty difficult to really have a significant impact with. So you can rip them on roaming packs out in the open world, but at the same time it's kind of like, is that really what I wanted to do with this ability? No. Yeah. So it's good. I mean, it's not bad. Nothing is bad for the Barbarian this patch. Probably the last thing that we're going to talk about for the Barbarian, and maybe for the video, considering how long it's running, are the aspect and item changes. The patch notes have numbers listed for these, but most of the aspects are flat damage numbers. So what Blizzard is doing is increasing the rate at which those damage numbers are going to increase because of item power. So the example that they gave is that an 820 item power Bull Kathos' Earthquake increases from 1700 at a minimum to 2600 at a minimum. So it goes from 1700 to 3400 to 2600 to 3700. So it's hard to explain. I mean, you've got it on the screen there. You can take a look at what they're trying to describe. But ultimately, what you really just need to know is that the damage buffs were, or there was only damage buffs to these aspects that they're listing, and they are all fairly well received, if we're being honest. Things like Earthquake, the damage of Earthquake isn't specifically why it's something that I use in this build. I like that it increases my damage when I'm standing in it, coming down from leap or ground stomp. But the fact that the damage itself is being buffed is still good, because if things get stunned within that, it is ultimately more effective at helping you on the DPS side of things, which isn't the worst thing to happen. I mean, whenever you get a buff, you just accept that buff. It's worth it. So the Earthquake's flat damage got increased. Dust Devils also had their flat damage increased. That's Dust Devils, Windlasher, and Devilish. I don't play with Double Swing or Whirlwind, so I don't have a whole lot of experience with Dust Devils. If you play those, let me know. Are they good? Do they seem good? Or do they seem better? I don't know if they're... And then as far as items go, The overkill aspect got its damage increased from 16 to 30% to 24 to 38. Pretty big. With Hellhammer getting its flat damage increased as well. All of that being said, that last portion is a little bit number hungry because of the flat damage numbers on those aspects and items, but I wouldn't think too hard about it. As far as the rest of the things that happened for the Barbarian this patch, they were all good. Even those last things that I mentioned, it's all good. No nerfs whatsoever for the Barbarian. Everything is turning up rosy and sunshine for us Barbarian players. I don't know about the rogues and the sorcerers and the necromancers and the druids out there. I know that they were going to, they were probably going to be hopefully evened out, I think is what I heard. But again, I don't play any of those character classes, and my first druid probably isn't going to be until season 1. So let's just call it the Barbarian, right? It's pretty tasty stuff. That is going to do it for me, though, everybody. Thank you so much for hanging out. If you made it this far in the video, please let me know. I know it was a little bit of a slog, but I will love you forever if you manage to get to the point where I'm asking you to hit the subscribe and like and comment features on YouTube. Can you feel the reward that you get from getting this far in the video? It's just nutty, isn't it? Well, all that being said, I've got more Barbarian along the route, the future. So there's videos coming, and with the XP changes, this character is going to be a lot easier to play. So there should be more stuff on the channel to come, and we'll be looking at the bleeding build for the Barbarian as well on my other character, coming up to very World Eaters focused and some definite inspiration from Warhammer 40k on the chaos side of things. It is Barbarian heaven over here, and I'm loving every second of it. But again, thank you so much for hanging out, everybody. Let me know what you thought down in the comments below. We'll be back next time with some more Barbarian Diablo 4 action, and until then, peace out. See you later. Have a good day. Have a good night. Have a good whatever you're doing right now. Bye.